Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Essay. Today we are gonna see, what if Essay born into the human world? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Prologue. For centuries, ever since the dawn of creation, dragons have been symbols of power and wealth, but over time, they came to be seen as embodiments of destruction. They spread across the world and implemented themselves into different religions. In some lands, they were seen as divine and benevolent, and in other lands, they were seen as evil and greedy. Both interpretations were true, but in one specific world of religion, dragons had both traits. In the Great Biblical War, a war that was fought between angels, devils, and fallen angels, the God of the Bible and the four Satans, the rulers of the demons, were slain in battle, leaving the angels and devils without leaders. However, before their deaths, they had banded together and formed a temporary alliance with the fallen angels in an effort to destroy and seal two shockingly powerful dragons. They were known as the two heavenly dragons. The red Welsh dragon, Drag, and the white vanishing dragon, Albion, were two of the strongest dragons to exist. For unknown reasons, they ferociously fought and attacked each other with great rage and disturbed the Great Biblical War, attracting the attention of the three factions. When it was apparent that the two dragons imperiled all that was around them, they were destroyed by the Biblical Alliance, and God put their souls into two of his sacred gears, objects and weapons of colossal power and possibility. However, even after being sealed, the dragons would continue their endless struggle through their hosts, who would inherit the sacred gears of the two heavenly dragons through pure chance. In modern-day Japan, one such anomaly took place. A boy named Issei Hyoudou was born after much patience from his parents, Ryokan and Ryoko Hyoudou. However, fate deemed that irony befall him, for his father was a pureblood dragon and his mother, a human enchantress. After much struggle to birth a child, both parents were blessed with a child. They decided that since they were beings of the supernatural world, their child would be sought out by danger. They took it upon themselves to teach their child how to fight and survive, hoping to teach all they could to prepare their son for the natural struggles of his heritage. Through the years, Issei showed potential, having adequacy in magic and promising physical strength. Though he lacked the ability to assume a dragon form due to his half-human blood, he was allowed greater control over himself due to less feral natures flowing in his blood. Hey Dad. A 6-year-old Issei was sitting at home with his father at their dining table. The family lived in a modest home that had 2 floors and a few guest rooms. His parents had chosen to live in the human realm in order to attempt to give their child a safer upbringing, far from open supernatural influences. Yes. Ryokan was reading his newspaper quietly, but he coughed on his coffee, causing him to gag and choke on the hot drink. Here, dear. Ryoko gave him a small cup of water, to which her husband thanked her quietly. I want to make friends, but all of the other kids avoid me at school. They say they feel scared around me and that I seem mean. Am I mean? Issei asked innocently, to which his father made a bothered look. He was bothered by the fact that others would shrink away from his son, despite having no clue about the supernatural. No, son. I think you are very nice. I think that you should show them that you mean no harm. If they still don't want to be friends, then you can't force it, otherwise, they won't be true friends to you. Remember son, a true friend is somebody who will help you because they know you and want to. True friends will actually care about you. The boy's father patted his son on the head warmly. Ryokan wasn't sure his son would completely understand him now, but he wanted to ensure that his son would learn this lesson, out of fear that misfortune would strike him in the future. Issei nodded after feeling release from his heart. Okay, Dad. Issei smiled and sprinted off to go play, leaving his father to watch him from afar. Ryoko walked beside her husband and laid her head on his warm shoulder. Don't worry, love. I'm pretty sure Issei will understand that life lesson. She sweetly spoke as she kissed her husband's cheek. Ryokan seemed to muse on a thought and spoke after a long pause. I think we should take him to meet old friend of ours. I hear they have a daughter about a year older than our Issei. He should get to know children his age outside of school. Now that Irina-chan left, Issei has very few, if no friends left. Ryoko seemed to agree to the idea, having set off to call their mentioned friend for a visit. The next day, Issei awoke to bright sunshine and a gentle nudge from his mother. Issei, wake up. Today we're going out to have some fun. She smiled down sweetly at her child. Really? Issei shot up with wonder in his eyes. So come on and get ready. We're leaving in an hour. Issei jumped out of bed, washed up, and changed and ran downstairs for breakfast. Whoa. You're really energetic this morning. Ryokan laughed as he witnessed his son's enthusiasm spike up. Mommy said that we're going out to have fun today. The boy smiled with a large toothy grin. Ryokan nodded in confirmation. That's why you shouldn't use all of your energy now. He ruffled his son's hair as the family gathered together for their morning dining. With breakfast done, they headed out the door and ventured through Kuo and arrived at a temple. Going up the stone steps that passed a red torii shrine gate, the Hyoudou family spotted another couple. The man looked stern and had short dark hair with sideburns going down the sides of his face. His stature was tall and mighty, as if he had the force of lightning behind him. The woman beside him was of great beauty. She had golden eyes, with black hair tied into a ponytail with a purple ribbon. She had an alluring figure and was wearing a shrine maiden's robes. If one person could personify Japan's ideal of beauty, she could. Strangely, behind her, clinging to her leg, was a young girl, no older than 7. She had violet eyes and long black hair and was dressed similarly to her mother. "Hey, Brachial, you're looking good. It's been what, 4 years?" Ryakin waved as he and his family stopped in front of the other couple. The stern man smiled and shook hands with his apparent old friend. "Yes, it has. It's been a long time since we got together. Azazel should be here soon." Brachial smiled as he and Ryakin waited for their other friend. "Oh? I hope he doesn't bring an invention this time." Haha. Ryakin laughed nervously as he remembered less than savory moments from his past about those inventions. At this joke, a magic circle appeared on the ground, causing Brachial and Ryakin to look at it. Who else would appear from the magic circle, other than Azazel? He looked like a slightly middle-aged man with a patch of dirty blonde hair on top of black hair. "It's rude to speak like that about your old friend, Hyoudou." Azazel smirked. "It's nice to see you two as well, Shuri and Ryuko." Azazel nodded to the shrine maiden next to Brachial and Ryakin's wife. "Oh my, and who is that charming young lady behind you, Azazel?" Shuri looked behind Azazel and noticed a young girl with long silver hair and blue eyes. Azazel smiled at the girl behind him. "Come and say hi, Vali." Azazel smiled kindly at the young girl behind him. Slowly, she stepped out from behind her guardian and introduced herself. "Hello, I am Vali. Pleased to meet you." Vali bowed courteously. Shuri and Ryuko simply found her unbelievably adorable. "She's so adorable. Just like Harakeno." Shuri giggled as she turned to the young girl that stuck close behind her. Now that she was in front of her parents, she walked shyly in front of everyone and introduced herself. "I'm Akeno Himejima. I'm honored to meet you." Akeno bowed in a nervous fashion. "You're right, she's adorable too." Ryuko smiled and waved at Akeno. "Issei, you should introduce yourself too." Issei's father looked at his son. Issei walked up and bowed to Akeno and Vali. "I'm Hyoudou Issei. Pleased to meet you." Issei smiled a toothy grin. After the 3 children introduced themselves to each other, they joined their parents as they walked into the bamboo forest that was close by. "How about you 3 go play? Just make sure you stay where we can see you and don't wander too far off, okay?" Ryuko looked at the 3 children, who all smiled and sprinted a certain distance from the group of adults. Looking at their children from a certain distance away, the adults began to engage in conversation. "So Azazel, does this mean that you settled down?" Ryakin smiled jokingly, though his words unintentionally hit a sore spot for the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels. "That was low and cheap, Ryakin." Azazel muttered in a crestfallen fashion. "Hahaha. Sorry. But seriously, though. Did you get with someone or did you adopt her?" Ryakin Hyoudou looked at Azazel with a careful glance. Azazel's face became a bit serious. He turned to his friends and spoke with a tone that he didn't use too often, given his lax attitude. "First, you have to swear that this stays between us 5, you hear?" Azazel glanced at everyone with him. All nodded, disturbed that Azazel would swear them to secrecy before sharing something. It was rare for him to get serious. "I found her, crying her eyes out while she was alone in a park. I could sense that Vali had devil blood in her the moment I got close to her. Her magical potential is astronomical and full of talent. When her aura started radiating from her, I instantly knew her lineage." Azazel's eyes seemed to be filled with nostalgia as he started talking again after pausing. "She's got the blood of Lucifer in her. She's told me bits and pieces of her past, but there isn't much else that she's willing to tell me yet. However, I know one thing. Wherever she came from, she'll be taking her back." Azazel's mind had mused over whoever was possibly related to her within the Lucifer line. "So, I chose to adopt her and raise her as my own daughter. That's why I brought her today, to introduce you all to her and to your children." Azazel smiled as he enjoyed the peaceful situation that he had landed himself in. "That was sweet of you, Azazel." Ryuko smiled as she spread the picnic blanket that she had brought. "For a villain from the Bible, I guess so." Azazel chuckled at the irony of his actions and the background he was given in tales of old. "Anyways, I think those 3 are going to get along well. I can already see it." Ryakin spoke as he pictured their children remaining friends into the future. "Speaking of, I've noticed that all 3 of them have a bit of supernatural experience." Azazel put his finger and thumb to his chin as he observed their younglings. "True. Me and Ryuko have been teaching our son magic and about our world. He's too young to be learning how to fight and practically use magic. Although he has accidentally used his fire breath before. There's also something that I've sensed that's different about him. Ryakan's tone changed to a more curious and ominous one. What do you mean? Barakiel inquired. I mean it's like there's a sacred gear in him. A phenomenal one at that. I recognize the sensation. Ryakan responded. I think he may have obtained it me, given my human heritage. Ryako looked on at her son with somewhat sad eyes. The same goes for my daughter. I think Vali has some human blood in her too. I've noticed a dragon's aura around, mostly due to Fafnir recognizing someone of his species. Though, I'm not sure what kind of dragon is sealed in her. Azazel hoped that it wasn't an evil dragon. Well, it looks like we have a lot to teach our children. Shuri chuckled. Yeah, I just hope none of our baggage from the past bothers them. Azazel laughed in a melancholy way, with Barakiel grunting in agreement and Ryakan smiling in conjunction. It looks like your daughter is already showing signs of awakening your holy lightning, Barakiel. You've been training her. And you too, Shuri. I think I heard her mention being able to purify spirits. Azazel looked at the shrine couple, who nodded. My family I wanted to get her ready in case they come knocking at our door again. If something were to happen to us, I want her to be able to survive. Still, she's too young to learn how to fight. Shuri looked down in sadness. Barakiel put a hand on her shoulder and rubbed it soothingly. How about this then? We all swear a pact. If something happens to any of us, we do everything we can to help out each other's remaining family. Ryakan suggested with determined vigor. Nobody objected or questioned the idea, instead, showing instant support to the pact. Agreed. Everyone went. As if the world were listening, a gentle and calming breeze blew through the landscape, causing the bamboo leaves to fly from their branches gracefully as a sign of the pact being established. Loud grumbles roared from Ryakan's stomach, causing the man to blush in embarrassment. Centuries and you still have that habit, you voracious glutton. Ha ha ha. Azazel joked as everyone else joined in. A certain distance away, within the range of their parents' vision, the three children were playing random games that they were thinking of on the spot. Issei. Tag. Vali sprinted after the young boy and tapped his shoulder. No fair. You used Akeno to distract me. He cried out as Akeno had called to his attention previously. Akeno stuck her tongue out with a mischievous smile. Puffing his cheeks in irritation, Issei jumped over to Akeno and tapped her lightly on the head. Tag. He smiled a toothy grin before running around in a circle. Ah. No fair. Akeno whined. The game continued into a circle of distractions and jovial complaints as the three solidified their bonds with common ground. Over time, they had learned of each other's likes and dislikes. The trio seemed to go on for hours, not ever being able to get enough of each other's company. They only paused when the adults called them to eat. When the day was over, it was clear that the five parents would be getting together much more often so that their children could continue to develop their social skills and so that they could reunite to savor their time together. As time went by, Ryakan took to training Issei more seriously once he got older. Originally beginning with simple exercises like push-ups, jumping jacks, and running laps, Ryakan started to give Issei weights to lift and martial arts forms to practice. Even swordsmanship was tutored to him. Ryako had also jumped in and taught Issei magic, specifically elemental magic. At the age of 8, Issei had begun learning bits and pieces of all that his father knew. In his prime, Ryakan was powerful enough to rival Tiamat, the strongest of the Dragon Kings. Whilst he had become adept at magic, Issei's ability with it wasn't up to par with his physical capabilities. On a certain day, Ryakan took Issei to the basement of their home and activated a magic circle, transporting his wife, son, and himself to a pocket dimension that was void of much insight. The sky was light green and shined as if auroras were overlapping each other. Issei, today, I'm going to test you. Ever since you turned 8, I've been training you relentlessly. Teaching you martial arts of all types, instructing you with weapons, and helping you strengthen your body to withstand severe punishment were all skills that you will need in life. Now that you're almost 9, we need to see how far things are going. Your challenge is to land 10 attacks on me. We will begin on your mother's signal. Ryakan then erupted into a red aura. The dragon's silhouette covered him, and his form disappeared and reconstituted itself into that of a dragon's body. When the aura dispersed, Ryakan was no longer human in shape. He had become a hulking red-scaled Asian dragon with glistening claws, razor-sharp teeth, and a bladed tail. While you cannot turn into a dragon in form, you still have all of the abilities and traits of one. Therefore, this isn't cheating if you're going to shout that. Ryakan chuckled as Issei was about to complain. Alright, get set. Ready. Go. Ryako fired a starter pistol, prompting Issei to go on guard. Ryakan dived at Issei with an open maw and breathed a red flame that burned and charred whatever it touched. Issei had leapt into the air in the nick of time and, despite his senses and mannerisms, punched his father in the neck, causing Ryakan to chuckle. Noticing the red aura that was left on him, Ryakan knew that Issei had managed to memorize basics. Good. Instead of infusing elemental magic into your attacks, you implemented internal energy, in other words, Chi or mana, into your strikes. Dragon scales are powerfully resistant to magic and the elements imbued in them. Only strong blows in tandem with magic or pure energy can damage dragon scales. Ryakan recounted a lesson that he had taught his son and went on the attack again. Spinning in a circle, Ryakan formed a spinning cyclone that knocked Issei into the air with pure wind. Issei had tried to use the gravity magic that his mother had taught him to stay grounded, but his father's might was still too much for his skills. What do you do when you get knocked into the air? Ryako quizzed her son. Try and flow with the wind and regain your posture without using over forceful movements, and then ride the wind. Issei relaxed his muscles and slowly but effectively stopped himself from being carried off by his father's trick. Charging his left arm with Kai, Issei rushed down from the air and punched his father as hard as he could. Landing a blow right on Ryakan's back, his father actually registered the physical contact. Leaping off of his back, Issei backflipped over his father's tail and used it to jump back into the air, with his father's tail as a propellant. Issei posed to strike again with his left arm. Ryakan mused on his observations. I knew it. His sacred gears in his left arm. That red aura and green light I saw in my son's aura, it has to be him. Ryakan had spent the whole match analyzing his son's actions to the smallest detail. He was sure that his wife was thinking the same thing. Ryakan lunged forward again, but this time at great speeds. Issei was surprised by the sheer amount of shining teeth that threatened to bite him. Pushing back against his father's maw, Issei struggled to keep it from swallowing him. Pushing back against both jaws of his father, Issei remembered something his father told him in the past. When a large enemy is trying to crush you from two sides, make sure to use a technique or your environment to force distance between both sides, and then back away. Using a powerful blast of energy, Issei fired two red beams from his hands that forced Ryakan to stop pursuing. Leaping a few meters away, Issei sprinted into a run and jumped, drop-kicking his father in the chest. Again, the attack did nothing to him, yet Ryakan made pleased chuckles. Ryakan smiled at his son's progress in his training. Deciding that he had to push his son even further, Ryakan charged a large orange orb of energy that made the ground shake. Issei's body began to shake as he felt chills run up his spine. What is that dragon thinking? Ryako shouted in her mind as she was about to step forward to smack sense into her husband until she noticed a look in his eye. I need to do this. Have faith in us. Ryakan conveyed those words to her through simple eye contact. Though she was reluctant to do so, Ryako relented and returned to her previous position, which was a safe distance from her son and husband. Firing a gigantic beam of energy from his mouth, Ryakan hoped that he was holding back enough to keep his son from dying. He needed Issei's sacred gear to awaken so that he could start training with it. Issei used whatever magic and energy that he could and formed a barrier that struggled to hold back the energy blast of a Dragon King. Issei was failing miserably and was ready to surrender until he heard a thought coming from himself. What do you need? Ask for it. Stated. Several voices, old and young, men and women, seemed to talk from nowhere, scaring Issei, but deep down, he knew that there was something that could grant his need. I need power. Issei muttered. I need power to prove myself to my mother and father. I need power to make them proud. I need power to protect my family. I need power to protect the people that I love. Issei's voice grew louder with each sentence. Are you scared? The voices asked. Yes. Then grasp the power to stop it. Finally, in a brilliant flash of green light, a red gauntlet materialized around Issei's left forearm. A red clawed gauntlet with an emerald jewel and two yellow spikes protruding from it had manifested over Issei's arm, shocking himself and his parents. However, before Issei could remark anything, he could hear a voice inside coming from his gauntlet. It was echoic and deep, sounding like a male's voice. You desired power and now it has been given to you. My name is Drag, the Welsh dragon, and I am one of the two heavenly dragon emperors. I am the Red Dragon Emperor. The voice rang out, but only Issei could hear it over the noise of combat. I don't know what this is, but I know that it's made me stronger though, so here goes. Issei didn't have time to question much. He was still in the thick of battle. Using whatever energy he had left in him, Issei gathered it into his left arm, forming an astral dragon's head over the red armored gauntlet. Boost. Drake's voice boomed from the gauntlet as the green jewel on the boosted gear shined in bright light. Immediately, he felt a surge of power course through him, boosting the amount of energy he had, which he used to pour into his last-ditch attack. That's Ryakan didn't get to finish his thought as Issei punched into his father's gut. While it wasn't enough to do any harm to him, Ryakan felt more damage than he had ever felt from Issei's attacks before. That's enough. Ryako rushed over to her son and husband, who had turned back into human form. Ryakan merely chuckled and patted his son's head. Geez. The both of you got too crazy, look at the damage you did to Issei. Ryako pouted as she used a special brand of healing magic to fix the bruises and scrapes on Issei. Son, do you know what that is on your left arm? Ryakan pointed at the red gauntlet. Issei had finally took a good long look at his arm and he was honestly shocked. He had never seen something like it before in his life. He didn't even understand how it had just magically appeared there. "No, I don't. Dad, what is it?" Issei looked at his father urgently. Ryakan looked quite distressed, but at the same time, he seemed intrigued. "Issei, you still remember what I told you about magic, religions, and sacred gears?" Ryako looked at her son, who nodded. Issei had hammered the information into his head due to his mother's emphasis on memorizing it. "That's one of them," Ryakan declared. Issei's eyes slowly bulged out of their sockets. "What?" he screamed. Thankfully no sound could easily escape the basement. "Indeed. That's also a very special one. It belongs to the Longinus class." Ryako confirmed Ryakan's revelation. It is. Issei was alarmed that a Longinus was infused into him. The Longinus sacred gear, a sacred gear that was capable of killing deities, was implanted into him. "And can you guess which one?" Ryakan asked. Taking some time to think about it, he remembered a myth about a particular red gauntlet that doubled the power of its owner every 10 seconds. "The boosted gear," Issei declared grimly. Both of his parents nodded. "That it is. And if I'm not mistaken, the Red Dragon Emperor, Drag, is sealed into it." Ryakan stared at the jewel on the back of the Issei's hand, expecting the dragon to speak. "It's been a long time, Ryakan. I'm glad that you're doing well." Drag's voice echoed from the emerald gem on the boosted gear, which lit up every time Drag spoke. "Thanks. I'm sorry for not making it in time to save you." Ryakan apologized on both knees, alarming Issei. "Don't worry about it. I don't blame you. I'm actually thankful that the same thing didn't happen to you." Drag sounded glad when he spoke. "Dad, what are you talking about? Is there something about your past that you didn't tell me?" Issei was confused. Ryakan sighed and decided that he should tell his son of his past, now that Issei was host to Drag. "Son, as you know, dragons are capable of living long lives that could be counted as being close to immortal. When I was born, the Great War was close to starting. I believe I was birthed around the time that several angels had fallen from heaven and descended into hell. Well, as I was growing up, the fact that dragons could become involved in the Great Biblical War had become a possibility, therefore dragons had begun to train to become even stronger. I was one of them and my master was none other than Drag, the dragon sealed in your left arm." Issei was utterly shocked that his father had been living for so long, but he stayed silent so that his father could continue speaking. He had also astounded at the fact that the mentor of his father was inside his red gauntlet. "I was young at the time that the war started, and for reasons that I don't remember why, my master, Drag, had started a frenzied battle with his rival, Albion, the vanishing dragon." Ryakan recalled the day where he had recalled two forces of white and red clashing violently throughout the realms. It was truly a day of terror that led to a turn of unforeseen events. "Even though my master and his rival fought, the other dragons didn't get involved, save for me. I had tried to intervene and stop my master and his rival before they destroyed the world, but I was too late. The four great Satans and the God of the Bible had destroyed the bodies of my master and Albion. While I tried to plead for them, I was injured in the battle that was taking place and was sent away by my master, saving me from a similar fate." Ryakan's eyes filled with sadness as he recalled his failure to save his mentor. Ryako rushed to his side and soothingly stroked his back. Ryakan looked at her gratefully as he murmured a small thank of gratitude. "It was then that I met your mother. A woman cursed to never age or die of natural cause." Ryakan's words had shocked Issei to the very foundation of his core. "Mom's immortal?" Issei looked at her in disbelief, but when he thought about it, his mother had looked the same as years went by. Ryako shook her head. "No, Issei. To be genuinely immortal is to be unable to die at all from whatever reason or cause. I'm only ageless and immune to natural causes of death like hunger, but I can still die in other ways. I'm not entirely invulnerable to illness, either." Ryako noted sadly. "Were you born immortal?" Issei asked with dread. Ryako shook her head. "No. I was cursed with it after I had tried to learn time magic. I failed miserably and thus, I was cursed with the backlash of the spells that I tried to master. Your mother found me close to death but nursed me back to health. Ever since then, we fell in love after I had been forced to assume a human form." Ryakan smiled as he cuddled closer to his wife. "A few years after getting married, I had been found by some old enemies, but Azazel and Barakiel saved me and your mother by chance. During that time, I was still recovering from my wounds. At first, I was apprehensive of them, but I learned that they weren't as terrible as they were made out to be. Over time, fate decided to make us run into each other countless times, and eventually, we became the best of friends after fighting countless battles to preserve our lives from strays of each biblical faction." Ryakan smiled as he recounted the multiple brushes of death that he had alongside the two fallen angels. "That brings us to the modern day. After we had you, we settled in Kuo and have been building a normal life ever since." Due to the dragons remaining neutral during the Great War, they've remained on neutral terms with the angels, devils, and fallen angels. Ryokan ended his story on that note. And that explains my past with your mother and the dragon in your arm. Now on to the boosted gear. Issei, that gauntlet will allow your power to double every 10 seconds until you hit your body's limit. When you've completely mastered it, you will have the power to kill deities if you use it to full potential, but I hope it never gets to that point. Remember what I told you, son. But great power, never use it foolishly, arrogantly, or selfishly. Issei recounted one of his father's lessons like it was told to him yesterday. Ryokan nodded and smiled brightly. He was extremely proud of his son's growth and hoped that he would never be forced to fight in the future, but if he had to, he knew that Issei would be able to defend himself. Ever since that day, Issei was trained by his father, Ryokan and Drag. If anything, he had been pushed even harder than before. Drag had begun to befriend Issei within 2 months, having opted to calling the young dragon-human hybrid partner. Ryokan was making Issei repeat practice with multiple spells and physical attacks and then throwing him into simulations where he fought enemies of different types and numbers in order to try and ready Issei for whatever dangers would be thrown at him. It was within Ryokan's knowledge that the wielders of the boosted gear attracted friends and foes alike. Trouble was never far behind. Along with that fact, Ryoko forced Issei to learn gentlemanly behavior out of fear that women would flock to him and that he would submit to dark carnal behavior. One day, Ryokan and Ryoko sat down in their backyard, sipping tea and enjoying treats. So, I see that you and Drag are ramping up his workouts. Ryoko sipped her tea. Yep. As he grows older, we need to adjust his routines. Hess got along Ines. That's all the world needs to make his life miserable. I never wanted him to have a sacred gear. I wanted him to be far and away from the supernatural realm. It was such a miserable place to be. Ryokan sighed before looking at his wife. And you've also begun teaching him how to treat people right, especially women. He smiled. Of course. Have you seen the old red dragon emperors? They were horny beasts. They thought just because they were strong, they were entitled to men or women. I don't want my son to be a parasite. Ryoko huffed. Come fire or high water, she would make sure her son had a decent conscience. That's true. Don't want him running around being an arrogant douche when he grows up. Ryokan couldn't help but laugh his head off at how serious his wife was. Not everyone who gets power stays good. Ryoko said. All seemed well, and Issei was truly on his way to becoming stronger. News had reached Ryoko and Ryokan's ears about a young devil girl in the underworld who was touted to being famous one day. They figured their son could match up to her. Still, Ryokan had failed to help Issei achieve Balance Breaker, which was something that he had desperately hoped Issei would obtain, but the time wasn't right. He knew that an intense situation and emotional state were necessary to unlock it. As much as he was strict, Ryokan loved his son too much to cause him that much turmoil. As his training continued, so did Issei's friendship with Akeno and Vali. They remained as close as ever, but as time went on, the three slowly drifted apart. The three spent less time together as Vali devoted more focus to her training, Issei focused on his own as well, but balanced it with studies, and Akeno became more social and started making more friends. Still, they contacted each other every weekend and met up once a month. In rotations, the three would choose a location to visit or an activity to do, and they would just spend the day maintaining their care for each other. Unfortunately, tragedy would strike the three and split them up. Around 6 months after Issei had obtained the boosted gear, Ryokan and Ryoko had fallen ill. It was a strange new and unknown disease that nobody had ever heard of. Azazel didn't know what to make of it and he couldn't learn anything from the other factions. He begged, traded, and did favors for anyone who could helped. It was fruitless. Barakiel had taken it upon himself to take journeys to different lands to find cures, but none could be found for nothing could be divulged from the sickness that plagued Ryokan and Ryoko. It had been a painful 4 months for Issei, who was staying with Shuri and Barakiel. Issei sat in their home, dwelling on his parents whenever he wasn't studying. Issei, lunch is ready. Shuri called over to the boy from the kitchen. When he didn't respond, she walked over. Akeno hadn't come home from school yet and Barakiel was still out searching for a cure. Issei? Shuri called him again. Issei was staring into the distance, his eyes glistening. Shuri sighed, knowing exactly what he was thinking. She hugged the child. Even though he wasn't her son, she could tell what he was thinking. Perhaps it was just generalized mother's intuition. What's wrong, honey? Shuri asked. Nothing. Issei shook his head. Issei, it's okay to be honest when we're in pain. It's only going to get worse if we keep it all bottled up. Won't you tell Auntie Shuri what's bothering you? It took some time, but Issei finally relented. When are my mom and dad going to get better? When will they come home? Shuri didn't want to give him false hope. At this rate, if no one found a cure soon, Azazel suspected that Ryokan and Ryoko would die. I don't know, son. All we can do is hope that they'll make it through. Your parents are strong and have been through a lot. Let's just wait and see. Let's support them as much as we can and visit as much as we can. I promise everyone's doing their best." Shuri felt her own heart quiver over their fates. It just didn't look good. After a total of 6 excruciating months, Ryukin and Ryuko were officially on death's door. Issei had become inseparable with them at that time. He had stubbornly refused to leave his parents, and it became clear that he understood that his parents were running out of time. In the Grigorous headquarters, Azazel had 2 of his best friends put under medical care. Even then, it wasn't enough. Issei sat between his parents' hospital beds, holding both of their hands in ominous sorrow. When he came here, he already knew what was waiting for him. Yet, everyone had already done their best, to no avail. Ryukin had lost so much muscle mass and looked paler than a sheet of paper. His cheekbones were becoming apparent and he had sickly patches of purple skin plaguing him. When he coughed, he shook with his entire body. Ryuko was the same as well, except she was even weaker than her husband and would cough and vomit blood at almost random times. Issei couldn't bear to watch his parents suffer. He prayed to whatever deity would listen to him, begging for the recovery of his beloved parents. No words from Azazel, Barakiel, Shuri, Akeno or even Vali were enough to console his breaking happiness. He, who was once bright and cheerful, had become a desolate and despairing 9-year-old boy. It broke hearts to watch his smile disappear into thin air. At their demand, Azazel, Barakiel and Shuri went to the sides of their ailing friends. Ryukin and Ryuko spoke to Azazel first. "Azazel, my old friend, my brother. I'm asking for a lot. I hope that you will take Issei in as your own and help raise him. The boy has no other family left." Ryukin pleaded to Azazel, who was fighting to remain composed. "Of course, I will, old pal." Azazel sniffled. His hands trembled behind his back. Ryukin smiled and turned to Barakiel. "Barakiel, I know that what I did sounded unfair, but I don't want my son to suffer. I hope that y'all forgive me." Ryukin smiled sadly at the fallen angel of holy lightning. Barakiel shook his head vigorously. "Of course not. I would never be offended. Just save your strength." Barakiel looked as composed as ever, but everyone knew how much he was weeping inside. "Azazel, Barakiel, please, teach Issei what you know, so that he can become ready to take life on as an adult one day," and Shuri Ryuko had spoken up and then turned to the shrine priestess. She stepped forward with tears trailing the sides of her face. "Yes." She choked out. "Please when you can, help Issei along like a mother would with her own son. I'm sorry to ask this of you, but I have no choice. I want my little boy to still feel the warmth of a mother's love." Ryuko cried softly as she weakly begged her old friend. "I swear on it." Shuri choked out another reply as she turned around to hide her crying. With their last moments imminent, the dragon and enchantress turned to their son. "Issei, promise me." Ryuko put a gentle hand up and caressed Issei's tearful face. He shook violently with sorrow, and it made Ryuko sad to see her son breaking. "You're such a gentle and sweet boy. You work so hard to make people happy and you've made me and your father so proud. The last thing that we ask of you is to stay who you are." Ryuko smiled her brightest one yet as a tear fell from her eye. She shed a tear knowing that she would never get to see Issei grow up into a man and she wouldn't be able to see the faces of her grandchildren. She was going to miss out on so much time and events. With her turn done, Ryukin spoke, taking his hand. "Issei. You've made me so proud to see how strong you've become. I want you to know that I am proud to be your father." Ryukin heaved a long raspy breath, making Issei cringe in grief at his father's deteriorated state. "I want to tell you my final lesson. Never let rage consume you. It is ugly and it drives us down terrible paths. When I lost my master, I nearly went into a frenzy that would have killed me. Use your power responsibly. Do not become arrogant." Ryukin took another long heave. Ryukin patted his son affectionately one last time before retracting his arm and taking his son's hand again. Ryuko followed Ryukin's lead and held her son's other hand. Issei shook violently with tears and sniffles as he knew the end had come for his parents. "We want you to know that no matter what, we will always be in your heart and memories. We love you, son. It is in our hopes that you become a man that will love and protect the people close to you." Ryukin and Ryuko spoke at the same time, shattering Issei's composure. Sobbing but hanging on to his parents' hands, he felt them go slack as the monitors watching over their heartbeats flatlined. Azazel, Barakiel, Shuri, Vali and Akeno stood behind Issei and watched in grief at Ryukin and Ryuko's lifeless bodies. As promised, Azazel, Barakiel and Shuri swore to raise Issei to the best of their ability. Some time had passed since Issei's parents had moved on to the afterlife. The 9-1/2-year-old boy was still grieving for the 2 people that meant everything to him. When the children that he knew in school bullied him for seeming different, his parents soothed and comforted him, reassuring him of his kindness endlessly. Now, that was absent. He had moved to the underworld, where Azazel lived. Azazel had been officially named as Issei's legal guardian and godfather, in case something happened to Ryukin and Ryuko. His new home was a large, almost palace-like place. A giant building that stretched far and wide blocked much from sight. The large grey building actually wasn't as intimidating as one would expect, considering it was the home of a fallen angel leader. Glass windows dotted the home of Azazel, and certain decorations of gold littered the design of the structure. Azazel, who was standing in front of it with Issei, put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Issei, from today onwards, this will be your new home. I know that it's different and that the world is different, but if you give it a chance, maybe I'll like it in time. Azazel sounded hopeful, praying that it won't affect the boy too much. Issei merely nodded silently with a gloomy drop of his head. He looked up at the building and felt nothing. No wonder. No fear. Just emptiness. Azazel chose not to speak any more about the matter in Issei's presence and gently guided him inside his home. Bali was patiently waiting for her adoptive father, or rather, she called him Papa now, and Issei. She recalled the day of the funeral, and it broke her heart when she recalled him wearing his suit and crying his eyes out. While Azazel, Barakiel, and Shuri tried to comfort him, he just couldn't stop the flow of his tears. Bali didn't want to imagine what it was like to watch a loved one be buried before her eyes, unlike how Issei had. Hearing the main entrance open, Bali dashed from her room on the second floor and rushed down the large stairs that led into the main floor. Her eyes followed the red carpet that paved the way down the golden stairs that would bring her to her objective. Hi Issei. Welcome to our home. Bali tried to sound happy, but she knew that it probably wouldn't elevate Issei's mood. Hi Bali. Issei smiled, but it was forced and small. Bali frowned in sadness until Azazel stepped inside the mansion. Bali, I'm going to show Issei around the house. Do you want to come too? Azazel hoped that his cheery daughter would be able to help soothe the mood, and to his relief, she eagerly nodded. Yeah. Bali wasted no time in replying and took hold of Issei's right hand. Issei looked up with a small hint of surprise in his eyes. Come on, Issei. From now on, it'll be with you. Bali dragged Issei with her as Azazel led the way around his home. There were multiple maids and butlers, most of which Azazel had recruited with sheer charisma, albeit several joined his employ willingly. The mansion had a total of 10 floors. The basement was a gym. There were several pools on the main floor for swimming. The second floor had a focus on guest rooms, even though bedrooms were placed throughout the structure. The third floor was full of game rooms. The fourth floor had the baths and spas. The fifth floor had meetings rooms and was where business talks took place, if there were any. The sixth floor contained the experimental labs. The seventh floor was a garden area for relaxation. The eighth floor was basically a movie theater, complete with several snack stands. The top floor was used for viewing the night sky, which could also be used to project the sky of the human world. While Issei had wanted to be excited about living in such an extravagant place, he couldn't find the energy in him to rise up and be who he used to be. While Azazel and Bali tried their best to lighten the atmosphere, Issei was stuck alone in his own dark depression. After showing Issei to his room on the second floor, next to Valis, Azazel had to leave to go to the Grigori Institute to deal with certain issues regarding sacred gear research. His room had white walls, a king-size bed, several pillows, and warm soft blankets and sheets. There was a gigantic TV in his room, with several desks, drawers, closets, and there was even a bathroom, complete with a large bath and shower, installed next door. When Issei got into his room, it was clear that he wasn't going to willingly come out. Even when dinner came and Vali delivered it to him personally, he only ate enough to avoid hunger. While watching him eat his miso soup, Vali saw the lack of energy that was present in Issei's movements. He didn't move normally, and it seemed as if a turtle would pass him up in speed, figuratively. After a short while, Issei spoke. I miss it. He muttered. Vali shot up from her seat in his room and looked at him. Miss what, Issei? She stepped over to him. She looked him in the eye and knew that he was about to snap. Issei threw his chopsticks to the floor after having enough of his new environment. I miss my mom's cooking. I miss the belching my dad makes after dinner. I miss my old room in Kuo. I miss playing in our backyard. I miss my mom tucking me into bed. I miss my dad making jokes. I miss my mom and dad. Issei sobbed as soon as he started yelling. Vali dove forward when she noticed that his fist was bruised and starting to bleed. Issei. Stop. She dived in and held his hand. Issei didn't seem to notice her and just used his left hand to hit the ground in an effort to vent his rage and sorrow. Hot tears streamed down Issei's cheeks as he agonized over the events of the past few days. What am I supposed to do now? Issei asked himself over and over. Vali wanted to give him an answer, but she had nothing to give him. She nothing to do him justice. Finally, she decided that she had to stop him no matter what, regardless of what she had to say. Issei. Vali shouted as loud as she could, breaking Issei out of his rage. The young girl gripped both sides of Issei's face and stared him right in the eyes. Determination flared in the silver-haired girl's eyes as she started to speak. What did your mom and dad tell you before they passed away? She asked with a strong and unshaken voice. Issei looked down and recalled the words that were blazed into his mind. That they're always with me and that they will always love me. Issei choked out as his tears continued to rush out from his eyes. Exactly. They said they were proud of you already. Continue to be someone that they can be proud of forever. A voice called out from the doorway, revealing Azazel, who had watched everything unfold. He walked over and took hold of Issei's bloody right hand and gently rubbed it while healing it with magic. I know it hurts, son. It's never easy losing people we love. It's even harder to forget or move on. We can agonize over it for a while, but we can't do it forever, Issei. Sometimes, we've just gotta keep moving with life or it's gonna pass us by. It's a waste to just wither away after we've lost someone. Azazel's words rang around in Issei's head as he mulled over what Azazel said and what his parents had told him. Issei realized that what he had been doing for the past few weeks had been the exact opposite of what his mother and father wanted. He now knew that he had indeed accomplished his old dream, but where to now? He just wanted his parents to be proud. That dream was done and gone. What now? What could become his new purpose? Issei didn't know, but maybe with Azazel and Vali, he could figure something out. Maybe they could even help the pain of loss dampen. Drying his tears, he looked at Vali. Issei, I know that you're big, brave, and strong. You always make me smile, but when you cry, I wanna cry too. So please, don't cry. She used her thumb to wipe the tears from Issei's face. At her words, Issei's eyes widened. The negativity in them vanished and something else replaced it. Hope and warmth, both things hadn't felt since his parents died. Issei, you don't need to rush to conclusions about what to do with your life. You're only 9 years old. Just remember that Vali and I consider you family and that we're here for you. Get some sleep. Azazel got up and carried the young boy in his arms and tucked him into bed. Azazel softly patted his head and left with Vali while leaving his door open so that he could hear him. After escorting Vali to bed, she made sure to talk with him before he left her room. Appa? Vali looked at him from her sleeping position. Do you think Issei will get better now? Vali was truly worried about Issei, who she was developing a crush on. Azazel wasn't sure how to answer her, but he knew one thing was certain. I'm not sure, but I do think Issei feels better now. Azazel smiled at his daughter. Good night, Papa. Vali turned around in her bed and drifted off to sleep. Azazel walked into the hallway and made a long exhale. I don't know how well I can do it, but I hope y'all watch over us, Raikin and you too, Ryoko. The Governor General looked up into the sky, sure that his dragon and human friends were watching from the afterlife. In his sleep, Issei found that he was in a white place. He looked around and noticed that he was sitting on something red and leathery. He looked down and recognized the head of the gigantic red dragon that he was sitting on. It was Drake. Drake, where are we? Issei noticed that they were flying, but where, was the question. It wasn't as if there was anywhere to fly to. Then, far in the distance, he saw 2 figures. Doctor Who lost infinite potential. Play song. As he approached, Issei's heartbeat quickened. He knew the 2 figures. Savor this moment while you can, Issei. I'm not sure how long it'll last, and I don't think it'll happen again. Drake spoke softly to Issei as he landed on what seemed to be solid ground. Issei jumped off the back of Drake's head and ran towards the 2 people. He jumped into the arms of the figures, his parents. Mom? Dad? Issei cried as the apparitions of his parents fiercely hugged him. Hi, my little Issei. Ryoko snuggled her child with her arms as her spirit savored the physical sensation that she was getting. Hello, son. We missed you. Raikin wrapped his son in a warm hug as he patted his son's head. Issei teared up as he got to converse with his parents again. How is this happening? Issei asked. Michael is letting us visit you in your dreams. Your mother and I managed to pass on to heaven due to our strong wishes to go there in case we could ever see you again. It was thanks to living virtuous that we got spots there. Raikin sat his son down as his wife joined them. Son, I want you to know that we've seen how lost you were after we died. Raikin felt no other words were adequate enough to describe past events, but reality had to be faced. Thankfully, Issei nodded and accepted that his parents were deceased. I can face this now, Dad. I won't get depressed anymore. I want to keep making you proud. Issei boldly declared. Raikin nodded in pride at his son's growth. Good. Then let me ask you this. Do you have a new dream? Raikin sprung a question that Issei had been developing an answer to, but he hadn't quite found it yet. Not yet, but I'm working on it. Issei smiled his toothy grin, making his father do the same. He didn't know how honest he was being. He was just happy to see his parents again. That's great, honey. Just remember, make sure that you think of a dream with all of your heart and soul so that you have no regrets when looking back. Even if an old dream ends, you can always find a new one. Ryoko hugged her son one last time as Raikin did the same. While we may no longer be here, there is always others that you can turn to, like that guy. Raikin laughed and pointed a finger at Drake. Indeed. Remember that you and I are in this together now, partner. Whatever you need help with, I'll do the best that I can in order to help you. Drake declared his support, to which Issei was grateful for. Also, Issei, just remember that when you are in doubt, you should think about the people that you care about. I promise that when you think about the people that you love, you will always find your way. Ryokan gripped his son's shoulders before patting his head one last time. Thank you and goodbye. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Dad. I swear, I'll keep moving forward. Issei looked at his parents one last time as his dream faded into white. Awaking from his dream, Issei shot out of bed. He looked around and noticed that he was in the room that Azazel had prepared for him. Drake then spoke from Issei's left hand. While the boosted gear didn't appear, a small green circle appeared on the back of Issei's hand. Was that real, Drake? Issei asked his partner. As real as a dream can get. Drake answered ambiguously. Sighing, Issei looked up from his bed and looked into space. I see. What are you thinking about, partner? Drake asked. I'm thinking that I may have my new dream already and it's something that I know that I'll never regret. Issei smirked. And what might that be? Drake asked again. I'm going to endure to become stronger so that I can protect the people that I care about. Issei tightened a fist and declared with powerful resolution. Haha. That's a noble dream and a hard one to accomplish, at that. You better be ready for the consequences then. Still, I'll do everything I can to help you accomplish that dream, partner. Drake laughed softly. Thanks, Drake. Issei then went back to sleep, eager to return to life so that he could get started on his new dream. Doctor Who lost infinite potential. End song. As a few months had gone, Issei had trained vigorously and had become quite studious due to Azazel's influence. With Azazel being an expert on sacred gears, he was able to help Issei with his training with a boosted gear. One day, he had Issei spar with Volley with their sacred gears. This would be the first time they'd spar this way. Before, they'd merely fight without using Drake and Albion's abilities. Issei, today, I'm going to have you practice fighting with Volley. I want you two to spar so that you can grow much more with direct live combat. Azazel elaborated. Volley looked competitively at Issei. I have a bad feeling about this. Issei felt shivers when Volley eyed him with a dangerous glint in her eyes and a mischievous grin. I get to spar with Issei. Volley smiled sweetly, which caused Issei to shudder. He knew that she was the better fighter, so he hoped that she would show him some mercy. Alright, you two, begin. Azazel signaled the beginning of the duel. Summoning their sacred gears, both parties froze and stared at each other. The boosted gear Volley immediately stopped moving and stared at the red gauntlet on her friend's arm. The divine dividing Issei was honestly flabbergasted at how fate was playing with them. The two knew of the feud between the Red Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperors and feared that they would be forced to viciously fight. Volley had burst into tears when she thought about that. No. 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 I don't want to do this anymore. Volley shuddered and broke into cold sweat while her expression twisted and became horrified. I don't want to fight Issei anymore. Volley started to panic as she sank to her knees in sobs. For some strange reason, Volley had overreacted to this new revelation. Volley. Issei rushed over to her, but she retreated and jumped back. When Issei looked her in the eyes, he saw an abominable amount of fear in them. Issei didn't understand what was going on. Volley was sweet and sometimes bold, and she never panicked. Azazel knew something deeper and darker was amiss behind Valis' reaction. It looked far too similar to PTSD to just be simple fear. Alright, you two. No training for today. Azazel decided to drop the training that he planned for the day. He had never ever dreamed that this event would happen. He had expected the two to merely compete, not for one of them to break down. Azazel immediately went to Valis' side without hesitation and gently embraced his daughter. Volley, what's wrong? What's scaring you? Azazel looked her in the eyes. Hearing Azazel call her, Volley very slowly started to settle down. When she looked at him, Azazel could tell she was having flashbacks of whatever traumatic experience was linked to this. Appa. Volley clung to her adoptive father. Tell me, Volley, what's scaring you? Appa, I've done very bad things. I'm so sorry. Volley started to sob, but she continued to talk. Appa, I don't want to hurt my friends anymore. Grandpa makes me do it. He said I have to hurt my friends who are my enemies. The Red Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor are enemies. Grandpa says enemies have to fight and kill each other. Volley broke down into pieces, horrifying Azazel and angering him. Why? Why did your grandpa make you do such things? Azazel was starting to get angry at whoever traumatized his daughters. Grandpa Rizavim said to do it. He said I had to fight because he was bored. Grandpa said if I didn't fight and do some fighting with my friends, he'd kill me and mommy. Volley choked out. Azazel was ready to grab Fafnir, go into Balance Breaker, and hunt down the bastard that dared to force his daughter to do such things. Rizavim, you sick bastard. Azazel forced himself to calm down quickly. He didn't want to scare Issei and Volley. Patting his daughter's head and hushing her warmly, Azazel soothed his daughter. Shhh. It's okay, Vali. You don't have to do that anymore. You're not with your grandpa anymore. It's okay now. You don't have to kill and hurt your friends, Vali. Azazel spoke softly. I don't. Vali looked up tearfully at him. Azazel shook his head. Vali seemed to take that to heart. For a long time, her grandfather, Rizavam Lucifer, had forced her to slaughter whoever she befriended simply because he was bored with life and thus used her mother as a bargaining chip to amuse himself with displays of destruction with Vali as a tool. Vali friends are people that you want to stay with and make happy. They are also people that want you to be happy. They are not people that you hurt and they aren't people that hurt you. You don't have to be like the people before you. Azazel continued to comfort his daughter. Issei looked on and absorbed what he had heard. He figured he wouldn't have been able to forget anyways. That's right. Issei stepped forward, causing Vali to look at him cautiously. Issei extended his left hand, which still had the boosted gear active. I might be the Red Dragon Emperor, but I don't want to fight to the death with you. I want to be your friend and I want to help and protect you, Vali. Don't you want to do the same and be my friend? Issei smiled a toothy grin at her. Slowly, Vali rose out of her panic attack. Yes. I want to be your friend, Issei. Vali smiled, took his red-armored left hand and clutched it. Thank you, Issei. She wiped her tears. Of course, Vali. Issei laughed as he patted her back. Azazel breathed a sigh of relief. He had prayed that his daughter wouldn't fall into Juggernaut Drive, which could be caused by severe emotional upheaval. The amount of grief and pain that he had sensed from her was enough to have made him think that Vali had seen the Great War. Knowing Rizavam, he probably made her see something similar. He always knew that his nephew was unhinged, but this was the last straw. While he couldn't do much without upsetting the delicate truce of the three biblical factions, Azazel knew that he would have to prepare Vali and Issei. Being the two heavenly dragons, they were likely going to attract much unwanted attention. Ever since that day, Vali and Issei trained even harder than before. It had become apparent that Issei was closest to obtaining Balance Breaker. Azazel didn't understand how, but it looked like he had underestimated Issei's potential. As for Vali, it took a while, but she was starting to slowly lose her traumas by whatever fortune she had. One day, deciding that the two children under his care needed some fresh clean air, Azazel took them to the shrine that Shuri and Barakiel lived in. Appearing in front of the gates, the three walked past the red gate and were warmly greeted by Shuri and Barakiel. Welcome. Shuri smiled radiantly as she hugged Vali and Issei. For a few moments, she had disappeared and returned with large bags of sweets and little gifts for the two children. Whilst they were close to turning 10, they still had a strong love of sweets, something that Shuri made sure to satisfy whenever they came to visit. Yay. We love you, Auntie Shuri. Issei and Vali lunged at her in overjoyed gratitude. Shuri just couldn't ever get enough of seeing the smiles of the two in front of her and her daughter, Akeno. It's only been 6 months, Shuri. No need to smother and spoil them so much. They get enough of that from the maids and butlers already. Azazel laughed as Shuri glared at him, causing him to retreat. She marched right up to him and put her hands on her hips. It'll have you know that you only visit once a year. How can I not spoil them? Shuri barked at Azazel, forcing him to stutter and stumble back. Oh okay, I get it. Just stop using those scary eyes of yours. Azazel screamed. Azazel had only incurred the wrath of her sadist mode once, and it was enough to never challenge her again. He still had the whip scars to prove his experiences. Barakiel was lucky to be a masochist, or else he would be traumatized for life. Now, children, Akeno is at school right now, so you can go play while you wait. She should be home in a few minutes. Shuri smiled as the two ventured into the bamboo forest that Barakiel had turned into a playground for them. Barakiel then came out from a room in the shrine and greeted his superior. Finally. I was wondering when you'd get here. Barakiel smiled. Well, training took longer than I thought. Azazel shrugged as Barakiel and Shuri groaned. You better not be pushing them too hard. Shuri growled at Azazel, but she was only doing it playfully. She just enjoyed watching Azazel cower in front of her. I am not. It'll have you know that the training they're doing is actually very safe given their crazy potentials. The Governor General tried to justify himself before a girl with long black hair, tied with a golden-orange ribbon, came sprinting home. Mom? Dad? Akeno waved as she dashed into her mother's arms. She noticed a third person present and beamed brightly at him. Hi Uncle Azazel. She said. Hello Akeno. Azazel greeted her kindly as he waved. Oh my. Did you have a good day? Shuri patted her daughter's head, who nodded. Then it just might get better, look who came to visit. At that instant, Issei and Vali walked back to the entrance, having heard the voice of their dear friend. Issei. Vali. Akeno. The three dashed at each other and grasped each other into hugs. Regardless of the time lapse that they had between each meeting, they never got tired of doing this. How've you been? Akeno looked at Issei, who she had worried about constantly ever since Ryakan and Ryuko had died. The three wandered into the forest and merely conversed while walking. While they never tired of each other's company, they played games less and instead immersed themselves into the stories of each other's past experiences up to this point. Well, we study, my dad has us trained so that we can make use of our natural gifts. But Issei volley snapped at the boy, who shrunk back. He never holds back and ends up leaving damage. Not to mention, he always hits me a lot during training. He almost never holds back too. Volley huffed. Really? Issei, you know that you shouldn't be hitting girls around. Akeno frowned at Issei. What? You shouldn't be saying anything. You're the one who kicks me in the legs a lot. I ended up limping for 2 weeks that one time that you hit me with magic. Issei was flabbergasted. He had never ever left inhibiting injuries on Volley, but Volley she tended to get carried away. Too bad. Akeno and Volley stuck their tongues playfully, causing Issei to feel unjustified. Girls. Issei grumbled as he felt two people push him into a small creek, causing Issei's clothes to become heavy with water. What was that for? Issei exclaimed. That remark sounded like an insult. Don't get me started at the insults you say behind our backs. Volley playfully smiled until she yelped in surprise. Oh yeah? Issei grinned as he splashed water at his two best friends. Ah. Issei. Stop. Volley cried out as she tried to shield herself. Jeez. Issei. Akeno giggled as she was splashed by cold water. Finally giving in to the temptation, Volley and Akeno hopped into the creek and started splashing water at Issei with playful vengeance. They continued back and forth for quite a while, until suddenly all three hybrids felt tingles go up their spines, a sign of danger. Turning to the road that led further into the bamboo forest, a large man stood menacingly. My, what do we have here? A devil and a fallen angel getting along? The man was hooded and wore a long dark cloak of black. His hands were pale, and a dangerous purple aura flowed around him. The hooded man seemed to take notice of Issei as he noticed the unfamiliar boy's presence. And it seems some unknown specimen is also present. No matter. The hooded man turned back to Volley and Akeno, who inched back but were ready for a fight. Ah. To think that a fallen angel and devil would be getting along. You should be fighting. It is unbearable to think that our endless feud would be taken so lightly. It is unforgivable, even for children. The hooded man sprouted 6 leathery wings from his back and charged at Volley, tackling her and grabbing her by the throat. Ah. Volley choked out as she materialized dividing. Divide. Albion's voice rang out from the white wings of blue light. The hooded devil grunted as he noticed a significant drainage in his power. Volley opened her palm and fired a blue orb of magic that blasted the aggressor backwards. Growling at the small sting on his abdomen, the rogue devil lunged at Volley again, but Akeno stepped in. Her fingers crackled with magical energy as tingles went up Vala's spine again, as if her natural senses were telling her to back away. Firing a bolt of holy lightning, the devil cried out in pain as the electricity jolted around him. Don't you dare attack my friends. Akeno growled as a look of urgency and fury erupted in her eyes. She knew that her attacks would only annoy the devil slightly, for the enemy had 6 wings. Almost immediately after being sent flying back, the devil came back for more, but Issei jumped in this time, sailing down and using his boosted gear to send the devil staggering a few feet back. The enemy merely brushed his coat. Suddenly, the rogue devil fired 2 beams of demonic energy that pierced Valis and Akeno's chests. Issei stared in shock and horror as his 2 best friends were gravely wounded. Volley. Akeno. Issei screamed as the 2 fell onto the ground, with both losing all movement. Ha 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 ha. The devil laughed as he looked at the 2 limp bodies in front of him. He was about to talk until he felt a complete change in atmosphere. Issei's power was negligible compared to him, suddenly spiked beyond expectations. Issei roared as he was coated in a deep red aura. The area lit up with the light of his rage as the boosted gear began to shine. Welsh dragon. Balance breaker. Drake's voice echoed into the sky as Issei was adorned in a red armor. Issei shouted as he rose into the sky. He had flown into a rage, without any signs of calming down. Boost. 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 Drake continued to speak this line over and over as Issei's energy reached his body's cap. Issei pointed both of his hands forward and fired a gigantic beam of red and turquoise energy that seemed to tear away at the air in its path. The beam's head was in the shape of a red dragon that seemed to roar as it rushed at the rogue devil that had incurred the wrath of the Red Dragon Emperor. When the explosion burst and the dust settled, the enemy was left standing, his left arm destroyed. The rogue devil growled, as if ready to take Issei seriously. He then paused, looking around. I'll let you live, boy. I've learned all that I need to today. Pray we never meet again. He snapped his fingers, a magic circle teleporting him away. Landing on the ground, Issei's vision began to blur as his body started to feel as if he had been lit on fire. Every step he took felt like he was walking on sharp spikes. His body felt like boulders had been strapped onto him and he wanted to vomit endlessly. Falling face first onto the ground, Issei reached out to his two fallen friends and breathed a small sigh of hope when he saw that they were still breathing. Fortunately, Issei looked at the path back to the shrine and saw that 3 figures were rushing to the 3 children. Issei. Vali. Akeno. The voices of Shuri, Azazel, and Barakiel rang out as Issei's consciousness faded. Darkness was all that was present in Issei's mind as he fell into a deep sleep. Little did he know, this was not the end of his troubles. Tragedy wasn't done tampering with fate yet, for the chessboard wasn't done being set up. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends.